There's two things we do with things that make us anxious. Something makes you anxious, you got two plays in your playbook. We try to control it, or we avoid it.
None of your business, Oshi. None of your business, Michael.
It's the None of Your Business podcast, hosted by Michael and Oshi.
Welcome back, everybody, to the None of Your Business podcast. This week, we have with us the one and only Rabbi Spivak. Rabbi Spivak, it is an honor to have you here. But before we begin, let's remind everyone that this is sponsored by Prime Source, of course, and we thank the team at Prime Source and all the partners that are along with us for this ride. And we ask you to please like, follow, and subscribe. It's difficult for me to say it every week, but I have to remind you because those algorithms are watching and doing their job, and we can use your help to get our message and our podcast out. Thank you. Rabbi Spivak, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Okay, Rabbi, why don't we just get right into it with who is Rabbi Spivak? I mean, we were talking a few minutes ago about our families and, we're getting to know each other a little bit more. And then I was like, hold on a second. Rabbi, you're not just a rabbi. You're not just an educator. You're not just a mentor and a therapist. You're also a family man, right? You're a husband. You're a father. You have a practice. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Friend.
Yes.
So he has his best friend as well, who doesn't know him as a rabbi.
Right,
He knows
right.
real Rabbi Spivak.
Trying to get secrets.
Yeah, I'm already prying.
Yes. The None of Your Business podcast for a reason.
All right, so I'm Aaron Spivak, and in the current chapter of my life, I am both the rabbi of a shul as well as a therapist in private practice. And in previous iterations of myself, I was an elementary school Rebbe. Actually did that for over 20 years.
Where?
Where? Most of it was at Yeshiva Darchei Noam, which then became Yeshiva Katana Aruvain.
Okay.
I taught fifth grade Haschalas Gemara. That was a passion of mine. I actually wrote books that are published and used in many schools now. And
So you wanted to pick fifth grade? Like that was your choice?
no, I fell into it.
Oh, wow.
But what I loved about fifth grade was that when it came to learning Gemara, which is so new and complex and different, I was starting the kids off from scratch. So I was able to do it the way I believe to be the right way.
So fifth grade is the turning point where kids start to learn Gemara.
Right. That was,
Right, so that's a big responsibility for you to figure out how to do the olive bays of Gemara.
Yeah. And, I have opinions about things. So obviously I have opinions on what the right methods and techniques and skills are that are needed to start off in Gemara. So being able to teach at that ground level was really gratifying.
I'd like to pause and get back to that later. Let's go back to who you are, a little bit of your background.
Who am I? And a little bit of my background. So it's a tough question. Who am I, right? That's that's an existential question, very philosophical. I grew up in Monsey, New York, went to yeshivas out of town, came back, and really, as soon as I got married at a pretty young age, I set out and started my career in chinuch. And that was really the primary piece of my public identity, that I was that well-known fifth grade Rebbe, right? And
So you became a Rebbe right after you got married? Your first job was being an elementary school teacher?
Yeah, I was a married and a Rebbe before I was old enough to drink.
Wow. When did you know you wanted to be a Rebbe?
When did I know?
Sounds very early on.
Yeah.
I don't know that I knew. I knew that it was
needed a
something,
job.
It was something I needed, and I thought it was something I thought I'd be good at. Let me give it a shot. I wasn't committing to it.
Very few people who need a job think of being a Rebbe.
Well, if they are more limited as he didn't go to college.
I don't know.
I'm looking to get into the business.
I took some training courses. Listen, I'm still waiting to decide what I want to be when I grow up.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Like I said, I know what I'm doing with the current chapter and stage of my life.
Love it. Love it.
And, making that transition from one chapter to the next, that goes with its own set of highs and lows.
All right. So being a Rebbe, tell us what that was like for you.
So being a Rebbe, like I said, I didn't make any long-term commitments. It was something I was going to try. And it was something that really, I just connected to it. More than the giving over of the knowledge and the information, it was the human connection with the students. That's what really kept me in it.
How long did you go for?
How long did I go for as a Rebbe?
As a Rebbe, yeah.
So a total of 22 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Total of 22
Mad
years.
respect, by the way.
Thank
I mean,
you.
after a while, you realize you're not doing it for the money, right?
That was a very short
Matter
while.
of fact, do they still owe you money? Like
What?
Did they put you on a payment plan? You know,
I hope not. I hope
No,
not.
Yeah.
no, Baruch Hashem. I
Do
had
you
the
see
good
like
fortune.
kids that come today to you and like, oh, Rabbi Spivak, do you remember me? Like from like 15 years ago?
Sure.
It happens all the time, right?
Sure, I get invited to weddings. Listen, if I can,
Oh, they're inviting you to weddings. Okay, thank God. Meaning, right.
if I can toot my own horn,
Yeah.
you know,
Please.
I was
We do it all the time here.
I was a really good Rebbe, right? I really connected well with the students. I was well liked. The kids learned a lot. They gained a lot of skills. They developed self-confidence, and we were well connected. Like the last day of school every year, okay? Believe me, I was thrilled at July and August in front of me. But I was really saddened that my day-to-day connection with this group of kids was coming to an end.
Wow.
You know, that's
My 5th grade Rebbe used to fall asleep long enough for us to leave the room, go to the bathroom, come back and find our seat, and he would still be sleeping. That was my 5th grade Rebbe.
and that's not an uncommon experience.
No.
I'll tell you that that's precisely why I made an exit strategy. If I was still in the classroom today, I might be that type of Rebbe. I might be the kind of Rebbe that the kids would be doing. I'd be edgy. I'd be, frustrated, burned out. And when I saw that coming, I said, okay, I need to start planning for what's after, because I'm not going to have 25 more years of kids saddled with me because I have nothing else
I have to say I love this because I meet with people that need career guidance, and I can't tell you lately the amount of Rabbeim that I personally have been meeting week after week who want to exit the Rebbe world and go into some sort of business because of your reason. And respect to every single Rebbe that does that. You give it your all. You really create a system that works, and then you can give on your system to others potentially, which I hope you're doing, right?
I have 3 published books on
Wow.
Hasidic Gemara, which are used in tens of schools.
That's amazing. But what would be your suggestion? What would you say to these Rabbeim who are leaving the rabbihood and they want to go into a career? What would I don't know generally what to say to them. I'd like to know your take on it.
Well, the first thing I would say is kudos to you for having the courage to recognize that you're a human being and the tank is going to run out. I would say to the Rebbeim a few years before that, be proactive. Don't wait until you're dreading every day in the classroom.
That's what the camera's for.
Don't wait until you're dreading every day in the classroom. Start preparing, because if you're going to do it well, if you're going to want to get some kind of degree and some kind of licensing, some kind of training, it's going to take some years.
So what would you recommend going from?
Into what?
Yeah.
That depends on each individual.
How can he recommend going into something specific? It's every
Because
person.
you have experience, a
What are they
decade
passionate about?
in
What do they
teaching.
like?
So
What-
No, I'm asking specifically. You have a decade experience in teaching. What does that call for? That's what I'm asking his opinion
I don't know.
based on that.
I guess you're asking, does teaching translate to
Right,
another
to
profession?
something else, yeah,
So
exactly.
similar things.
Right.
I can tell
exactly.
you, for me, because the thing I cherished most about teaching was the human connection. So going into therapy was a very logical progression.
Cool.
Right? If some people love the technical aspect, so maybe going into being a corporate trainer, or if people love the public, there are so many things that, if people love the information spreading, so they want to go into some kind of IT field, or if they want to stay in the education sphere, either go into education administration or curriculum development. There's so many things that you can do. Educational technology is a booming field with so many different things. So there's a lot of places to go. And then some people might want to say, you know what? I did this. Let me do something totally from scratch.
Yeah.
And let me sell insurance.
Rabbi Spivak, let's go a little 360 here. We're talking about the Rebbeim that have, like you said, the courage to recognize that this is not for me anymore, and I'm not doing any of the kids any favors by sticking around year after year. And let me go find a different path, right? What about those Rebbeim, and we all, had those, that are a little bit past their prime, way past their prime, and they're probably doing a very big disservice to the kids by remaining in the field. And I think the school usually keeps them on a little bit longer because they're tenured, and it's in a way disrespectful after all these years to say, it's probably not for you anymore, let's bring in the younger Rebbeim. What do you do about that? I mean, it happens in every school where you have those unqualified, who were very qualified for many, many years. They were great, and we should appreciate what they've done for many years. And I'm not saying that we should just hang them out to dry, but something's got to give. There's got to be that. How do we treat that? What do we do about that?
So it's a tough and painful question. Listen, if you have a colleague that you've been sharing coffee with every morning for the last 30 years. And he's put his heart and soul into the kids and into the school, right? And now you know they're at that point. It's very tough not to have your number one allegiance to this colleague of yours or this employee of yours who you want to show Hakar Zatov to. But I will go on record and say that the top priority of the school must be what's right for the kids. Now, you can't treat dedicated Rebbeim, you can't mistreat them for the sake of doing right by the kids, right? Because that's not going to help the kids in the long run. If you have Rebbeim working in an environment where they feel like, the walls could be caving in on them at any time.
Right.
But if a school knows that the kids are suffering because this person doesn't have that passion and that love and that excitement, and everything the kids are getting is antithetical to what we want them to get. In the end of the day, it's the school's administrator's position. They have to prioritize the kids first and the Rebbeim second. And how do you handle that? What do you do with this individual? That's going to be a case-by-case basis. How much does the person recognize that they're past that prime? How much are they in denial that they don't have it anymore to do it in the way it needs to be?
We're talking about it's clear as day to everybody. The school knows it. The parents of the children know it. The Rebbe himself probably knows it. But he's got nothing else to do.
But is he ready to admit it?
No,
right?
he's still in denial a little bit.
Right. So
how forceful do we need to be? I mean, you're saying that you got to put the kids first, not at the expense of the Rebbe, not to mistreat. We're not mistreating him. This is what needs to be done. I mean, kids are suffering from this. Class after class. At what point do you have to actually forcibly remove this Rebbe in the nicest way you could possibly do? But you got to do it.
So this is actually brought down and is discussed. Their shilos and shuas is actually discussed in halacha, and what's accepted across the board is that if there's somebody else who is very clearly going to be demonstrably better for the kids, you have to make the change, right? Now, you're going to do everything you can to help the person get training and help them, see if they can rejuvenate themselves. If
it's hard to teach an old
if it's past that point,
typically these people are doing this for 30 plus years.
So if there's a space to carve out for them in the administration, right? We raise funds for so many different things, right? So if the school knows that they're not going to be able to dismiss this Rebbe, right? It would be a community outrage because the person wouldn't have a job, right? So if we need to take on a community fundraising project, so 25 kids every year don't have to spend 5 hours of the day with somebody who's bitter and snapping at them, right? Instead of showing them passion, love, and excitement and building them up, right? I think that's a worthy cause. So if you have to say to somebody, listen, we found a job in the school for this person, we need to fundraise an extra however many tens of thousands of dollars to pay that salary.
Yeah.
So
it's a nice idea, Rabbi Spivak, but historically, I don't think that's been happening. I think historically, our communities are somewhat guilty of avoiding this topic.
It's getting a lot better now, though. It is getting a lot better. I could say personally, with my experience, that schools are paying more to get more Rebbeim, and the only the bottleneck
right, for the up and coming.
Yeah, the bottleneck that they had.
Every school still has those Rebbeim that have been there
but
for many, many, many years.
It took time. It took time to perhaps for.
I hope so. I'm not in the game as much.
Ushi, is the point of this discussion so that we can talk about doing things exactly as they've been done historically? Or are we having a discussion to come up with ideas and new thoughts to improve things in any way?
The latter.
So yes, that's historically how it's been done, right?
Yeah. By the way, you should start an organization. Somebody should start an organization to help transition some of these Rebbeim, not even the ones that are getting a lot older, maybe the ones that are somewhere midway through and they realize, wait a second, I don't know if this is the best thing for me. I probably want to do something else. There should be an organization to help them just integrate into the workforce and find a business that's suitable for them. Why don't we start something like this? Why don't we have some? I'm challenging you. Maybe you seem like you would be perfect for this type of thing.
Maybe.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it offline.
I just don't know if that's something I choose to do with my time.
Well, something. If not you, you'll spearhead.
So
we'll find the right person.
I guess the first question to find out is if something like this exists yet. That would be the first question.
I guess it's possible.
And if not, I would bring this to Torah Masorah. They're the ones who are there to support Rebbeim and to build the infrastructure and the materials and the and the inspiration that the mechanchim need, So developing an exit strategy is part of that. There's been a tremendous push in recent years to make sure the Rebbeim save for retirement and have pensions for this very reason. That once a Rebbe is at retirement age, he doesn't have to keep teaching, just to pay the bills, right? So this can be an extension of that. Besides for having a way out at retirement, have a way out when it's time.
Yeah,
when it's time to move on.
That's a great idea, by the way. People have taken upon themselves life insurance to fund for Rebbeim, which is also a good idea.
Very important.
Organizations
I love
that do that.
We just had something actually here happen at Prime Source, a little bit controversial. Like we were in a very gray area, and we weren't sure how to proceed. But it's right on this topic.
How's my facial expression? Is it okay? Like I'm ready to hear what you're about to say.
You sure? You weren't actually.
I'm like getting nervous here.
You
Who knows
didn't know
what's
about
gonna drop?
it as it was happening.
Okay,
You weren't involved
I'm ready.
so much in the
Okay.
process.
Okay.
But a few of us here that were thinking about hiring for a certain position at Prime Source, and we didn't quite exactly find the right person. But funny enough, it just came up one day, and we realized, wait a second, this person actually might be great for it. And who was it? He was a Rebbe. He's a Rebbe in an elementary school. And he also does like certain organizations that he spearheads throughout the year as well. He runs campaigns. He runs like certain organizations that he helps do their campaigns. And we're very impressed by him because his managerial skills were off the chart. Like you could tell, like he was very detail oriented. He had a great personality. He was he was pretty loud. He speaks very well. He articulates himself very well. He has a lot of these characteristics that a Rebbe typically has. And we're like, wait, we should offer him the job. I think he would be perfect for it. And me and a few of the people here, we agreed. And then at one point, like we asked ourselves, wait a second. He's a Rebbe. He's learning Torah and he's teaching Torah. Not only he's teaching Torah. Is it our place? Is it appropriate for us to technically now solicit him? And I don't think he's thinking about leaving the chinuch space. But we were going to introduce the idea to him, and we were even thinking about how to entice him. Like, I'm going to lure him away. I'm actually going to offer him. I'm basically going to say, stop doing what you're doing. And let me tell you why you should come into the business world, because you're going to be perfect, and you'd be great. You have a lot to offer. And then we realized that, I don't know if that's like so ethically, morally, halachically correct to do. And we held off, and we decided not to. We said, we're going to speak with a few people about it. We never actually did.
Let's do it now.
We never took, but exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's so interesting.
Love it. I do remember what you're talking about now.
You remember what I was doing?
Yes, absolutely. It's also because when a Rebbe organizes events, they become event coordinators.
Right.
They
learn
really
about
do.
so many different things.
Right. And when they're teaching a class, they're selling themselves on the product or the subject matter that they're experts on.
Customer service with their parents.
Sales, right.
They have to make sure that their parents are, right? They have to learn how to deal with people's personalities.
Rabbi,
they have to
this
be
is a
somewhat
great-
proficient in technology.
Rabbi, before you give your thoughts, I just want the listeners to know who you are more than just the Rebbe. So continue that line for just 30 seconds. So from becoming a Rebbe, you then did what?
So from becoming a Rebbe, I then transitioned into being a therapist.
Okay.
And there was an overlap between the two.
Sure.
For a couple of years. First I went to school, then I did my internship, and then I did my, hours under supervision to get my state license. And all of that happened while I was teaching in the morning and doing this work.
How long did that process take? Just curious.
How long did that process
Until you saw your first client.
So I was in school. So the first thing I had to do was finish up my bachelor's degree. So that took a year. Then 2 years to get my master's degree. And then because I was still teaching in the morning, to get my clinical hours, my licensure is called licensed mental health counselor. So I needed 3,000 clinical hours to get my license under supervision. So I did those 3 hours. It took me 3 years. They ideally want you to do it in 2 years, but
I'm super impressed. I just have to say
with 6-year process,
right, with what you did, because a lot of therapists today are social workers, and they're okay. They have the ability to help people, but you took it to the next level, and that's great. So you're definitely qualified to answer this question. Let's go back to this question. As a rabbi of a community, I
didn't get to that part yet. How I became a rabbi of a community.
Oh, which happened when? Sorry.
So that happened after I became a therapist.
Oh,
you're talking about when you became a Rav.
Yeah.
But that's a separate topic.
100%.
Get to
100%.
That'll be
it's
kind
a good
of
story too.
Yeah.
That'll be kind of part 2.
But now let's go back to the question.
Let's still start when you were a Rebbe. When you were a Rebbe and you're a therapist now.
Yeah.
Because being a Rav, by the way, I have lots of questions about that, and I'm very, very curious to hear about a lot.
But you're very qualified to answer this question, which is why I like.
What do you do?
What do you do? I love this question.
Are you allowed to even? Am I allowed to? And should I feel bad that I took somebody away from learning to actually actually work?
Right.
How
And
does that work?
we deal with this challenge in business all the time of poaching other people from companies. That's a separate question,
topic.
which we're not talking about. We're talking about taking someone
A
away.
Rebbe.
A Rebbe. Someone who's helping the
Right,
community.
no, we're giving him a parnassa.
Right.
We're giving him a parnassa.
And
actually.
he may get an offer in a year from now from someone else, and instead he could come to us, and we wouldn't even be inviting that. We may be doing him a favor as well. So
Yeah.
how do we address this? Great question, Oshi.
Yeah.
It's a great
It's
question.
only a great question because it's a real time.
And for the right person.
It's
yeah.
actually happening.
Yeah.
The therapist in me is chomping at the bit to get to something you dangled in front of me. You said those words, should I feel bad? Right? That's like,
Jewish guilt.
right.
There's nothing that competes with Jewish
And
guilt.
it's really relevant to the answer because this is not a black and white question. You know, on one hand, you're going to look and like, there could be hundreds of children who would have this really dynamic, qualified, great person influencing their lives, building their self-esteem, you know, giving them a passion for Torah and mitzvos. Why would I want to stop that? But then on the other hand, listen, maybe this person wants to, you know, do right by their family and, you know, and bring in, as you mentioned, you know, being a Rebbe is not the most lucrative of fields. So maybe I want to do right by their family. And so it's a tough question.
Sure.
So there isn't a black and white. So you threw in this idea of, should I feel bad, right? So when we approach a decision of, I'm afraid of doing something that's going to make me feel bad, right? So that's a very negative space to be approaching a decision from. You know, the first word of that phrase is should, right? So anybody who's ever sat in my office knows the word should is vile, right? It is foul language. What does the word should mean? Should means one of two things. Either I am taking the world's expectations and putting it on me. I should really work harder. I should really, be better at this. I should. Why? Who said should? Well, that's what the world told me, right? Or I'm taking my expectations and putting it on everyone else, right? So he should really have, well, who said? Well, that's what I expected, right? Somebody should really, why? Because I think so, right? The word should always carries with it negative energy. The word should will always put you in that, because should is always followed with but, right? I should really do this, but I'm too tired, I'm too lazy.
The world wants me to do this. Should I do this because the world wants, but I don't want.
Right.
But.
Right. What is the other way? What is on the opposite side of the should paradigm? Is the will. What I want. What is my will? In Hebrew would say, what is my ratzon? What do I choose? Right? What is my bechira? Right? The should operates in the emotional sphere, emotional reactivity. Right? Oh, I have to do this because I'll feel guilty if I don't. Right? It doesn't get into what is my will. The word should doesn't address my ratzon. It addresses my guilt. So when you have a question like this, when you have an ethical or a moral question, let's say moral question, that's not clear, that doesn't have a right answer or a wrong answer, the way to address it is by looking into your values. What is the list of values that I have in my life, right? That I choose to live by, not because I should, but because that's what I choose. That's what I want my life to be about. Right? And values don't always have to be like these virtuous things that they'll write about in your art scroll biography, right? Your values are anything you value in life, right? And some of them might be virtuous things, and some of them might be just things that are important to you because they're important to you, right? When you look into your values and say, based on my values, what is it that I choose? Now, values take emotions into account, right? But to answer that question, do I offer somebody who's currently an effective and valuable member of the chinuch world a corporate job, right? Well, what are my values? And based on those values, what is it that I choose to do? What is it that I want to do? but what if I'm making the wrong choice? What if I'm doing the wrong thing, right? That's something that we have to have the courage to move past, to have the courage to rely and trust our values and make choices that are going to bring that out and going to make our lives valuable.
So we're not offering him a job.
No. What he said
Like,
was,
wow.
Michael, you're jumping.
Wow.
You're jumping right away. You pulled the trigger.
I'm saying that's the value.
I'm
That's
still on assessment
clear.
right now. I want to assess this.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So I listened very carefully to what you said, and I see a very clear distinction between should and between want, and I'm with you on that. And now I'm thinking to myself, what are my values that I choose to follow and to believe in? And ultimately, at the end of the day, look, my values are I want to be in the corporate world and I want to make money. And why do I want to make money? I want to make money so I can do certain things. One of those things is that I can support people in my community like Rebbeim, right? People that aren't as fortunate as us and they're not driven by money and they need money still, is to help them. That's part of what my values are. And therefore, he's already doing that. He seems to be happy. I'm not doing this because I'm thinking maybe he's miserable and I can save him. I'm thinking selfishly. I think he would suit our needs. He would be an enhancement to our company. And that's why I want to go after him. But he's happy right now. And he's ultimately doing what I'm going for eventually. That's why we all want to make money so we can spread it around to our community. And now I'm thinking the right thing would be to let him be. And maybe even put out a probing question or two to kind of get his idea of where he's at, feel him out if he's really happy with what he's doing, and then make the decision. But for now, I'm not in a place that I have the right to say to him outright, come work for me because I'm going to pay you $1 million. That's the wrong move. Let me first feel it out. Let me come put a couple of questions out there, and then make that decision based on what I think is correct.
And that's a beautifully articulated expression of this concept. I'm just going to, before I add more of my thoughts to the specific topic, how does it feel to come at a decision with, what do I want to do based on my values versus, should I feel bad if I do that?
I love it. It's liberating, Brad.
It's liberating.
Yeah.
It's empowering. Mm-hmm. I get to make choices.
Yeah.
When the Torah says, Uvacharta b'chaim, choose life, it means choose life, right? Make choices of your life, how you want to live. And it is liberating, it is uplifting, it's empowering, it's amazing.
Yeah,
right.
I feel good about it on my own. Like I just came to that conclusion. Obviously, you gave me sound advice. You gave me a tool. Right. You just gave me a tool that I can use in other times, other instances as well. And I just used it right now. And I applied it right here. And I feel like, you know what? I don't always need to run to a rabbi about things because I have the capabilities of making decisions based on my experiences in my life and based on what I value. And does it apply to that? And I think that that's very useful. It's going to serve me very well. And I appreciate that. That's amazing.
Amazing.
Mike, a little breakthrough moment over here. What do you think? What do you think?
It was a little easier for me because I have experience with Rabbi Spivak and understanding the tools that he gives me because I've known him for a number of years now. And you've given me tools in the past, and which, Ushi, you couldn't have said it better. You didn't just think about what he said, and now you just said the answer. He gave you a tool, that tool of understanding the should versus will, right? Meaning, is it my desire? I have to confess something. Yeah, go ahead.
Will and desire are two different things.
Yeah.
We can talk about that later. I just had to throw that in there.
No,
because we all have desires that are not our will.
Right.
Not a true will.
Right.
Are not what we choose to do.
Yeah.
We desire it because we're
right. Forget the word desire.
We desire. Yeah.
I agree with that. I'm just going to say like this. I used to go to every single wedding. I used to go to every single bar mitzvah. I used to go to every single Sheva Brachas. I felt bad. I felt guilty. And then finally, my wife one day tells me, she goes, do you want to? She literally said it, but she didn't come from the idea of the tool that you're saying now. She came from a practicality.
Right.
Like, what are you doing to yourself? Go if you want to. And then every time now I go to a wedding or a bar mitzvah, or I think, do I want to go here? Is this friend important enough for me to fly in? Do I need to drive an hour? Should I, right? Versus will I? It changed my life from that perspective. So I'm realizing that tool, and I need to use it even more. Of course, sometimes I'd like to fly in, but I can't because I'm with my kids doing something else.
Michael, remember,
you choose not to because you choose to stay with your kids doing something else.
Right.
Exactly.
It has to be
that's my value. That's what I
That
want to
is
do.
what you're choosing to
That's
do
what I'm choosing
based on
to
your
do
values.
based on my values.
the want should be
Rabbi,
about
love
what are your values and follow that. And then, even if you don't, I don't want to go to the bar mitzvah tonight because I'm not in the mood. Because I'd rather be home watching the show instead of going.
Whoa! Is that your value?
Now
That's a desire.
That's a desire.
Ah,
But
that's
now I'm
good.
thinking, what is my value? My value is community. I love community. To me, it's very important. And I know if I go to this person's bar mitzvah, it's going to bring a smile to his face. And also, when I make a bar mitzvah, he's going to come to me and bring a smile to my face. So community is very important to me. So now I want to go, even though I'm not in the mood, I want to go because I predicated it on what my actual values are. But Spivak, this is game-changing, by the way.
Absolutely.
I'm going to institute this in so many things now going forward. And you know what? I'm going to be happier for it.
You're definitely going to be happier for it. And the positive things that you do are going to be with a different energy. When you do something positive because you should or because you have to, right? So what have you accomplished in your mind? I escaped blame. I freed myself from guilt, right?
Freed yourself from guilt. Oh.
So what did I accomplish? What was tonight about? Freeing myself from guilt. What does that fill me with when I'm freed from guilt? When I say, one second, I'm not operating in the guilt sphere. And I'm going to do the same exact thing from a place of a values-based choice. Now I didn't escape guilt. I lived my values that I wanted to live. I'm filled with enormous positive feeling about my life and about what I'm doing.
Can we talk about Jewish guilt for a second? Can we talk about that for a second? Because that's a real thing. Okay, and all of us have a Jewish guilt. Maybe the barometer for some are 90%, some are 1,000%, but everybody's got a little Jewish guilt. And I can't imagine it's a good thing because Jewish guilt is one of those things that really makes people very down and very depressed. Because let's face it, our whole lives is about living for God, and it's all about Judaism and doing the right thing. And if you're not doing the right thing today, then you better work on yourself to start doing the right thing, right? And if you're not, it makes you feel less than, it makes you feel unworthy. I want to share something with you. I want to share something with you both, Michael. You know this because we talk about this sometimes, but I'm going to share something, okay? I have Jewish guilt to the point that I stopped doing certain things because I don't feel qualified. I'll give you an example. Like when I go to shul, right? I used to sometimes daven, daven for the Amud, or lead the synagogue in prayers for those that don't know what that means. And I always felt like somebody who does that needs to be, someone who's, I guess, who's I don't want to say a very righteous person, but you have to, it's a big responsibility. You're leading other people, right? So I stopped doing it. I stopped doing it because I don't feel like I'm the best. I'm not a bad Jew. I'm not a great Jew. I'm average at best, maybe even sometimes. That's Jewish guilt in me, right? That's 100% Jewish guilt.
Absolutely.
And I'm probably wrong. And I even mentioned this one time to my rabbi. And I even told him about this. And he looked at me like, wow, what are you doing? What are you talking about? That's fine. Don't worry about it. But I still don't feel worthy. And that's just one example. And there are others as well. And Jewish guilt, and it brings people down. It's demoralizing. And it doesn't just affect you. It probably affects your family. It affects your friends because it has a rebounding effect, right? And everybody starts suffering from it. So Jewish guilt, I think, is a huge trigger word. I think it's something that snowballs and has a big effect on you and your life and other people around you. How do we deal with that? How do we get rid of that? How do we minimize it? How do I manage Jewish guilt?
You're speaking to a topic about which I am so passionate. I'm so glad you brought that up. One of the niche clienteles that I service in my therapy practice are young men who can't get out of bed in the morning, right? Whether they're in yeshiva or post yeshiva, literally, and more commonly in yeshivas, where the direct consequences don't attack you so much. Guys who are getting out of bed 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm not exaggerating, right? And what is the go-to response to the people in their lives, their parents, the mashgiach or rabbeim in their yeshiva? The go-to response is to ramp up the pressure and the guilt, right? If you would want, you would get up. You obviously don't. And if you had something that was important to you, you'd get up, right? Ramp up the pressure. I'm going to knas you. I'm going to fine you. I'm going to make you feel lousy about yourself.
I hear those voices, Michael. Do you hear them?
Absolutely.
Do you remember those voices?
I remember.
Right, we all know. Yeah, we all have that, yeah.
So I do a lot of work with these clients, and thank God, I can say that we've accomplished a lot of great things. These young men who we work together, the changes they're able to make are really life-changing. So I once get a call from a mashgiach in the yeshiva, and he saw one of his students who he's been hawking, and trying to drill into the ground about this issue for years with no success. And within like 3-4 months, he went from getting out of bed at 3 o'clock to getting out of bed every morning at like 9:30. And then ultimately, most mornings on time for chakras, for the morning prayers in the yeshiva. So he says, you got to tell me your secret sauce, right? So as a business person, I'm like, if I give away the trade secrets, and I'm like, yeah, this one's safe. I could tell him he's not going to implement it. And I told him as much. I said, I'll tell you, but you're not going to do it. I said to him, the first thing I told him was, what time you get up in the morning? Doesn't matter. You want to get up? Get up. You don't? Don't. We ramped down the pressure. We created a vacuum of guilt, of anxiety, and all the things. Guilt brings anxiety. Anxiety that I'm going to be rejected, that I'm going to be looked down upon, right? There's two things we do with things that make us anxious. Something makes you anxious, you got 2 plays in your playbook. You ready? Or at least 2 different books of plays. We try to control it, or we avoid it. That's what we do with the things that make us anxious. So the first thing we'll do is, okay, I'm going to make a log, and I'm going to write down what time I went to sleep, and what time I wake up, and there's going to be a whole system in place, and I'm going to give myself this reward, and that, and I'm going to set a perfect amount of control. When that doesn't work, I avoid it. Now, what am I avoiding? The whole anxious setting. What's the anxious setting? I'm going to walk into the Beis Medrash for chakras, and I'm going to be, 20 minutes late, and the mashgiach is going to be looking at his watch like this. And he's going to look at me, and I'm going to feel, right, like a worthless piece. I can't deal with that, the angst. And then the whole idea of getting up, am I going to be on time? That whole thought process, right? So my subconscious brain is just going to avoid the whole thing. These guys say, they all tell me that you're not trying and you have to try harder. I'm trying so hard. And I'm like, it's the greatest injustice, right? You don't know what to do because your brain is avoiding a situation that is just too intense. So we have to create a vacuum of the intensity, a vacuum of the guilt, a vacuum of the anxiety, and in that vacuum, ratzon can take root. You guys are business people, so let's put it in business terms.
Please, yeah. You're right. That's kind of how we understand things a lot better. And for not people that are into business, somebody's into sports. So it's very important to humanize things and to find where that sweet spot is for someone so they can understand it in layman's terms, right? Like what you're saying now, by the way, was amazing. And I'm with you, but you didn't bring it home yet. You didn't bring it home yet. And I love that you right away said, let me now give you another version that you can understand.
Business terms. Here we go.
Go ahead.
When you're operating in the guilt sphere, you're always operating in the red, right? The guilt sphere says what? What is baseline? What is that
we could
zero?
Be doing more. We could be doing
What is that 0 line on the balance sheet? The 0 line is perfection. If I'm perfect, I'm baseline. I'm at 0. I'm at where I'm supposed to be at the starting point. Mm-hmm. Who's perfect? Who has all their ducks lined up? Who gets it all right?
Stefan does.
Well, besides Stefan, right? Nobody, right? So therefore, what's defining me? My debt, okay? When you're in the red, what's the thing on your mind the entire day? How in the red am I, right? And if I manage one day or 1 week to make everything perfect, what do I say? Oh, I'm out of debt. I'm not in the red anymore. Is there anything positive? Absolutely not.
Lack of negative.
Right. It's all about lack of negative. So there's this total focus on the negative, more negative, less negative, right? I'm always in the red. When the baseline, when that 0 line on the balance sheet is where I am right now, wherever that is today's starting point. That's today's baseline. Now, where do I want to go? I'm free to go wherever I want. Where does my will take me? What are my values? Right? Do I want to get up for chakras? Well, right? Do I put value into davening, into being in the shul together with the community, or what any other reason that I put value to it? I'll do it. And if I don't, I'll use my time and energy on something that is in line with my values, right? So the Jewish guilt, right? There's always going to be something to be guilty about. There's always going to be a reason to be in the red. And when we're focused on that, what happened to all the things I'm doing right? What happened to all the things that are valuable and meaningful about what I'm doing, right? They're not there. The only thing that defines me is that red, is that debt, is that flaw, is that fault. So who could live like that? Now I'm so anxious because there's always a reason for me to be rejected and put down and ashamed. So now I'm so anxious about that. What am I going to do? I'm going to avoid. I'm going to check out, right? So
enter avoid. That now becomes the next coping mechanism because of all that guilt that we've been compiling and just been collecting over the years. Now the answer is let's avoid those things because it's not working out for me. I don't want to feel that.
And
way.
it's not a conscious decision.
Right.
It's
avoid.
It's a preservation mode, right? We are programmed to avoid the things that are dangerous.
Right.
Right?
It's our reflex.
Instinctual. Right. It's a reflex.
Yeah.
So when it feels dangerous on an emotional level, right? The amygdala in our brain, which is there to find the dangerous things and alert it to us, it doesn't distinguish between physical dangers, like a bear jumping out of the woods and having me for lunch, or the emotional danger of being looked down upon and shunned from the group, right? So I have to avoid the whole situation where I'm anxious about being shunned.
Right.
So I'm not going to show
Which is another problem. You just went from one problem to now a second problem. Feeling guilty is no good, and avoiding is no good. But that's ultimately, like you said, those are the two things.
Those are all the same thing.
Okay, so you've heightened the problem, what's going on, and what people go through, right? And very well, I may add. So now comes the real question. Let's bring this home. What are we simple people? What do we do? How do we not have the guilt and not avoid? Because I'm with you. Like, I'm thinking about my own son. I'm trying to apply this to myself. And everybody that's listening should do the same. Apply it to yourself. Where are your shortcomings? And where do you feel like maybe you're causing somebody else to have... I'm thinking about my kid. Like, I don't have a 13-year-old, 14-year-old boy. But I'm thinking if I did, and he's sleeping till 2 in the afternoon, am I going to get down his back? Am I going to start... No, I'm not going to chastise him. I'm going to do what you're saying. I'm going to lower the temperature in the room. I'm going to make sure he doesn't feel like I'm just, putting anxiety on him. And I want him to have that space so he doesn't have to avoid. So he doesn't have to check out from everything else that we have and what I'm telling him and what else is important. I want to make sure that I'm creating a safe environment. So the guilt, I don't want him to have. I don't want him to do it only because his father's telling him, because his Rebbe's telling him, because that's what's normal in this community, because if he comes to shul late, he feels like an outcast. Because everybody's on time, only he's late, he feels very uncomfortable, the guilt. So what does he do? I'm not going to shul at all. I don't want to have that feeling. I don't want to have that pressure. What does he do? He's going to avoid. I don't want him to avoid either. I'm thinking about my own kid, right? I'm thinking I don't want him to be unhappy. I think every parent wants their children to be happy. Most important thing. So I want to have, so he can't, I don't want to give him the guilt, and I don't want him to avoid. Rabbi Spivak, help us. What comes next?
Okay, so you threw two things in there that have to be separated. One is how do we deal with it in ourselves? And then you started broaching the topic of parenting. And how do we raise our kids in that healthy way?
Okay, but that's not limited to parents to the children. Anything. I'm saying from one person to another person.
But how do we deal with it ourselves and how do we not give it off to other people?
Correct.
Those are two different questions.
You're saying there's a very specific thing when it comes to parents, children?
Shielding ourselves from the guilt and the negativity that's being thrown on us,
right,
and living in a positive sphere, right, is one question. And then how do we create a positive sphere and not a guilt sphere for other people around us?
That's a different thing.
That's right.
So let's stay in our lane where we started. Let's stay in our lane for ourselves. How do we avoid the guilt and then the avoiding for ourselves?
So that's a complex question that every person is going to have their own journey on. And it really depends, where did that guilt come from in your life? And finding the courage to step outside of it. Somebody who comes from a background where that was the message they were given in the home, and that was the message they were given in school, that you only matter in as much as you meet up with our expectations. And if you do everything the way we expect you to do it, you're passable, right? Nothing more, just passable. And if you do things that are short of that, you're rejectable, right? So if that's the message you're given, right? So there's a lot of internal work to become the voice of positivity that you perhaps didn't have. To have the courage to say that I am going to reject those messages that I've been given, and I have permission to reject them. I will be safe in rejecting them, right? Why is it that these messages are so deeply embedded in us, right? It's a very deep psychological reason why particularly the messages of parents are so hard to step outside of, right? When you're 3 years old, can you navigate this world on your own?
No.
No. If you were left to your own devices, you'd have nothing to eat, nothing to wear.
You'd die.
No shelter. You would die.
Yeah.
Does a 3-year-old typically know that?
No. That they would die if they're left alone?
That they must have caretakers. Otherwise, they're in big trouble.
I don't think they comprehend that yet at that age.
But is it instinctual?
Oh, yeah, maybe. Yes. You could say it's instinctual.
What happens if a 3-year-old feels like they're lost and nobody's around them? What happens if
He'll
a 3-year-old
cry, he'll scream.
Scream. Why?
Ask for help.
Because
They don't know how to take care of it.
Because I'm going to die.
No, but naturally,
I'm
right.
hungry.
Not a
I'm
conscious
hungry.
thought.
Good
Who's
point.
going to give me
Yeah.
food? Who's going to give me clothes? Ah! Right?
Yeah.
They start screaming and crying, right? Until some kind person finds them and tries to calm them down. Let's find your parents, right? Why? Because instinctually they know that without parents to provide them with food, clothing, shelter, nurturing, they're dead.
And that's where it starts.
So now, when you have a parent who gives over a negative message about the child, right, about their self-worth, about what they need to do to be acceptable or anything like that, that's a perhaps less than ideal message or a corrupt and dysfunctional message.
It's a hurtful message.
Right? But the child has two options. Option A is to see it for what it is. Right? Maybe the child's already 8 years old and knows that they're not worthless, knows that everything. But if I see it for what it is, what does that mean about my parents? That they're not the greatest, the best, the biggest, the strongest, the smartest, like every child will scream through the schoolyard, right? Right? My parents are the best and the greatest, right? They're
flawed.
They're flawed.
They made mistakes.
They're human.
Or worse, they're abusive.
They were wrong.
Right, they're wrong.
They were downright wrong.
Right. What does that mean about my survival? To recognize and take in that my parents are capable of those types of mistakes, right? It means my survival is in jeopardy. That's way too intense. So what's the other option? My parents are the smartest. They are the greatest. And if they tell me that I'm only acceptable under these conditions,
That's what I'm going to do.
that must
You're
be the truth.
perpetuating what the
Right.
problem was from the beginning, and that's all you know.
But-
and you're not stepping outside of what the real problem was. Where it
My
started.
survival depends on that being the truth.
Right.
So now I've internalized that message. So now it's 20 years later, it's 30 years later, right? And I find myself living in this shame and guilt cycle, right? Why? Because at 5 years old, my survival depended on my believing that this was truth. So I still believe it's truth. And having the courage to go and give yourself a new message and step out of that message, that negative message, that takes a lot of courage, a lot of internal work, and
A lot of work.
and it's going to come with some pain.
Of course.
Because
nothing good.
It's
No pain.
right.
No pain,
It's
no
going to come
gain.
with pain. Saying, accepting a truth that I've been shutting out
Yeah.
my whole life, and saying, no, the truth is that this painful thing is real.
Why
right?
are humans so complex? Can you believe? I mean, think about it. We're wired in such ways that we are. And then there are people who want to tell us that this all just happened. There was a big bang. And one day this all just happened. We were that lucky. We were that lucky that these intricate details I mean, people are such fickle beings, but we're constructed of thousands and thousands of different components. And how many limbs do we have? Billions of things. But this all just happened. Look, I'm not, like I just mentioned, I'm an okay Jew. I do my best. But the things where the people are out there that just say that there's nothing, there's no higher being, there's no divine power, it's mind-boggling to me.
I'm going to go back. I'm not letting you off the hook so easily. Okay?
Okay.
You just said, you repeated, I'm an okay Jew. I do my best.
Yeah.
That assessment is based on what?
Based on I understand what the expectations are in order to be a good Jew. I'll give you an example. Yeah.
Stop right there for a
I
second.
don't meet those lines. I don't meet those
Who
criteria.
told you that is the expectation to be a good Jew?
That's who told me, like specifically?
Where did you adopt that message? That now
My
you
surroundings,
hold
the people.
so now you are defined not by all the amazing things that you do. You are defining yourself by how short you're falling about the message that you got of how you should be. Oh,
Correct.
This is what I should be, and compared to that, I'm okay, right? Do you do amazing things in this world?
I sure do.
So
I absolutely do. There are things that I do very, very well, yes.
So why are you okay? Because there's a gap between you and where you should be. Why are you not an amazing person for the amazing things that you do?
I think because I'm ranking all the different things, maybe, that I do. And the beautiful things that I do maybe is more common found than others. And therefore, I'm not extra special because of it. But then there are certain areas where I fall short. And I think it's high up in the rankings, again, because that's what I was told. I didn't know this on my own. I just know that if you don't daven 3 times a day, right, morning, afternoon, at night, then that's like a baseline of being a good Jew, a religious Jew at least. I don't do that. So to me, I look at myself that I'm falling short in that area, and that's an important one. It's a big one. It's a really, really big one. So even though I give a ton of charity, and I can't say no to people. Somebody asks me for something, I need to help them, right? And that's amazing. It's very nice. There are a lot of people who do that as well. There are a lot fewer people who every day, 3 times a day, consistently, they don't miss. I know I have a lot of my friends that do that, and I look up to it. It's amazing, but I don't do that. So I tell myself I'm not as good.
Okay. Right. Now, imagine that you grew up in a culture that everybody gives charity. You give a lot of what you do, right? You help people when they ask. That's the baseline. And it's also a nice thing to daven 3 times a day.
Oh my God, I'd have so much more confidence.
So
I'd feel great about myself.
Right. So you cheapen your self-image because of the cultural message that you've taken in about where you should be, right? Where should you be?
Well, Rabbi Spivak, I mean, let's be realistic. Let's not pretend like this is coming out of nowhere. I mean, we've all been through the same systems. And this is what's been going on for decades and thousands of years. This is what's been happening. We've all created, in Judaism, in our communities, it's all been created sort of that establishment, right? And everything comes from there, right? And from there, guys like me, we don't have decision-making power. We fall in line. We're a part of the system. All of us, we're all part of the system. So where does it come from? I don't know. This is probably a question better suited for some of the elites, some of the grand rabbis, some of the people that are responsible for cultivating the system. But that is the world, the system that we live in.
That is the message that a big part of Orthodox right-wing Jewish culture does give. Yes. How much do you want to frame that or use that as the framework for how you see yourself and how you choose to live your life? That is up to you. You don't have a choice of what, at this point in your life, you don't have a choice of what the message being preached by society might be. But you have a choice to say, let me identify the values by which I want to live and try every day to live them. And the more I live my values, the more I'm encouraged. And in the ways that I'm not yet living up to the values the way I want to, I'll try more tomorrow.
Yeah, I've started doing that a lot, and for the most part, I'm very content with it. I have that moxie, I have that arrogance that I beat to my own drum for the most part, and I'm content with it. But there is still a small part that still feels a little bit of the guilt and all that. But I'm speaking about this because I know there are a lot of people out there that are not happy as they could be because they're letting all this stuff weigh them down. And what you're saying is very, very sound advice. You know what it really tells me, Michael? And you always say this. And Michael's been very oddly quiet, by the way, throughout all this. I don't know what's going on here. There's a lot of things spinning in his head for sure. But Michael is a very, very big fan of therapy. He really believes, and I agree with him. I think that everybody, when they hear the word therapy, you know what they think of? They think of, oh, I have like this embarrassing problem that I have to now address, and they have such a negative stigma about it.
Is there something wrong with me?
There's something wrong with me? Yeah,
Right.
There's something wrong with all of us. We're all flawed, and we all are, we're designed to be problematic, and we need to fix ourselves and make ourselves as best as we possibly can, which means everybody can get help, everybody can seek that counsel and have a teammate. No good sport ever existed without teammates. You got to have a coach. You got to have a captain. You have to have somebody that's steering the ship. That's therapy. That's what it is. So we're big fans of that. We always say.
Listen, this afternoon, I will be on somebody else's couch. Right?
Beautiful.
Once a week. I don't miss my session.
Right. Even the people that are giving the therapeutic sessions.
Especially the people that are.
Especially also because I don't want to have somebody telling me if they're not worked out themselves. If they're not addressing their own demons, I don't want to take advice from such a person. So I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think, Michael, that we should start like this thing, like in schools, there should be in elementary schools. This is a crazy idea, by the way. This is a crazy idea, but it might not be so crazy after this conversation. It might not be so crazy. Let's start a thing that there's English, there's science, there's math, there's Limud HaKodesh, right? There's Chumash, there's Gemara, whatever it is. And then there is counsel, therapy, one-on-one. Every kid must go once a week. Twice a week, whatever it is. They must go. It's a class. It's gym. You got a half an hour gym for exercise, physical exercise. What about mental exercise? What about preventing mental health before it happens when they're 30 years old, when they're 40 years old, 50 years old, people are still struggling. Let's attack this from the roots. Like you were saying, it happens something when they're younger and as they're progressing. Let's attack it at the root cause. Why are we not instituting this? Rabbi Spivak, can you help us?
So I love the idea. I love the idea that every child should have a weekly counseling session. We don't have to call it therapy, counseling. Fantastic. Listen, the reason, the greatest obstacle to that, and maybe the top two fighting off of the obstacle are A, stigma, but I think even bigger than that would be funding, right?
Funding?
Yeah.
We find money for things we care about. I don't want to hear funding as an excuse, please. Okay, you have any idea of the kind of things that are in our budget to run this country? You know, every year Congress has to put out a whole budget about, what we need to spend money on. Do you have any idea of the things that they put on there? And somehow they find the money for these weird, wacky, ridiculous things. Our kids, this is our future. This is the next generation. Money?
Yeah.
Money. The three of us in this room. We're gonna raise.
Listen,
somebody wants to execute this idea, and somebody wants to take this to the next level. I promise you, there will be the money. You build it, and they will come.
So in East Ramapo or any school district, really, right? Students who have mental health issues that are interfering with their schooling, right? They get mandated therapy, and just from that alone, right? Not just from that, for a lot of things, right? The East Ramapo school budget, is a disaster, right? The whole district is, there are times, my wife, who is an amazing occupational therapist.
Oh, my wife too.
Okay.
Yeah. My wife always says OTs is like, well, I'm going to say what afterward, because I might dismantle what you're about to say, so go ahead.
Well, she has spent a lot of her career in the school district, working for the school district. And there are times when, if she has to print out a worksheet for the kids to do, she has to print it at home because there isn't any paper left in the budget.
Stop.
Right. The school district is a nightmare. So if you're going to then start introducing, an individual therapy session once a week for every student.
Yeah.
I mean,
privately funded. We're going to fund this privately. We're not going to rely on the government who does nothing for us. We're not going to rely on them. By the way, one of the things Aaron Weeder, who was on our show a couple of podcasts ago, told us that one of the issues that he's running for is to protect the education to remain in the hands of the parents in the state of New York. Because right now, it's shifting in a way that the local government is going to have a lot more clout on what type of education should be infiltrating into our private schools, not just in the public.
Be careful if you want my opinion on this.
Well, I guess this is another topic that we could talk about. But he's fighting for this. That's one of the issues he's standing on. Like
because in a lot of ways, I'm on the other side of that issue.
Wait, you want to give more control to the officials of what should be taught in a school versus what parents think?
Obviously, that's not ideal.
Okay.
But, and I'm going to say this unequivocally, the disastrous education that many students are getting where many of them leave school with zero prospects of functioning in the secular world, in business, or in a career. And their life choices are hampered. And sure, you can trot out many examples of people who are tremendous successes in business and things, but the number of kids who are having their education robbed from them so that their entire lives are spent in menial labor and having to just eke out a living, right, is child abuse.
Yeah.
When you rob a child of basic education to know English, to know math, to know the functioning studies that you have to function in society, and you say, no, we're going to send you out at 18 years old knowing nothing. You can't put together a coherent sentence.
That's criminal.
You can't handle.
I agree with you.
And I'll listen. I'm not going to be politically correct. There are still way too many kids who are getting that education, and Hashem says, God says, who is going to stand up for my children? Right? Is it going to be the leaders of the community? Is it going to be their parents? Is it going to be the educators? And not one of those people answers the call, right? So who steps up? The most unlikely of heroes, Kathy Hochul. She's the only one answering God's call to make sure that kids who come out of a yeshiva should have basic education to function in society. She's the one, right? And I'm not going to get into politics of what I think of her and her policies and as a candidate. But she is the only one answering the call, God's call, who's going to step up for my kids. So what's our response? Let's fight it. How dare she? How dare she try to stand up for Jewish kids getting a proper education so that they have career prospects, so that they can live a menschlich life and earn a menschlich living without being stressed about money from the time that they're 18 until the time that they leave the world. So I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of when our community shows that we have proper value, that to make sure that no kid is going to be allowed to slip through without getting the education that they deserve. So then, of course, who would want the government involvement? You know, it's like any other child abuse. Who wants the government getting involved in how kids are raised? Let parents raise the kids. But when, God forbid, you have a parent that's abusing a child,
You get involved.
you need the government to get involved. Okay? So when we have, and I'm not going to give numbers, right? But I know I've spoken to young men and women who look at me and say, I'm 20-something and I don't know basic math. What am I supposed to do for a living? Right?
Or can't spell.
And can't spell.
I can't read
I can't
properly.
string a sentence together. I sit down for a job interview and I don't know how to sound like a mensch. Right? And they're crying. And the courageous ones will go to a school like RCC and take remedial everything and pull themselves up and make something of themselves. But not all of them have the fortitude to do that.
Yeah.
Right? And I talk to them. And I have them sitting at my Shabbos table telling me that this is their experience. So if the government are the only ones going to stand up for them,
So be it. Rabbi Spivak, why don't you tell us how you really feel? why don't you actually share with us how you feel on this topic? But by the way, love it, and I'm your biggest fan on this topic, as are many others. You're right. But I don't know if we intended it this way. I mean, there's a line, obviously, that shouldn't be crossed. We agree that there has to be an education being provided to the children so they can function properly in our society and they can get a job. How many of these kids could we ultimately support, collectively? It starts adding up over time. We're going to be outnumbered, right? We have to make, especially, in the Hasidic, the ultra-Orthodox communities, they're at a much more rapid pace. And you have kids by the thousands every single year that they're growing by, and if they're all going to be at the same limitations of what their education is like, there's going to be a limitation to what jobs they can get, and they're gonna all start depending on one another, and before you know, it's going to be too many takers more than givers, and it's going to get out of control.
listen, you go to shul, right? And you're in shul on a weekday morning for 45 minutes, right? How many people are coming by?
Yeah,
Because, right?
it's crazy.
What do you want from me?
Yeah, but you also have to agree, though, and I'm sure you do, is there's a certain limit to how much we want them to have control as to, for example, we agree that they should be taught some basic math, beyond 7th grade. Like a lot of schools, unfortunately, stop it at 7th grade. It's over. High school, there's no math anymore. Now you're learning just all day, right? So if Kathy Hochul says that even from 10th grade, from 9th grade to 12th grade, you have to have 3 hours of math and only 2 hours of your private studies. That's not okay. We don't need Kathy Hochul telling us. Meaning, we as parents, we want this for our children. We want our children to be educated, to be able to survive in the real world and thrive in the real world. No? You think that it's we can't trust the parents?
Many of us, and most of us perhaps do.
But you're saying in the ultra, are you talking about in the Hasidic communities? Is that what you're talking about?
Predominantly, but not 100%. But I would say predominantly. I speak to the people, right? The parents are not pushing for their kids to get. Some are, and some.
But isn't that their right?
What
is that called child abuse? If let's say there's a Hasidic parent lives in wherever they live, and they don't want their kid to learn English, math, beyond 8th grade. They don't want them.
Is it their right?
You're saying Kathy Hochul is standing up for God, that she's forcing this parent to let their children learn math and English? Are you saying that?
Is it a parent's right to turn out their child into adulthood completely ignorant of basic life education? I think not.
I think not. But are we okay to judge them, to say that we want to actually now interfere with their parent decision? That I would think a parent has all the rights, but how far does it go? You're saying this is how far it goes. That in this instance, Kathy Hochul should absolutely be able to infiltrate the Hasidic community.
I just want to say at a minimum, if they're funding, then yes, right? If the government is helping fund things, then they do have a right to say something.
They're not funding the private schools.
No, we're talking about them giving funding. They're giving funding for books.
That's not the issue at hand here.
No, it is not.
No.
It's part of it. It's a big part of it.
You're saying even if it's funding or not funding,
I'm going to ask you this.
to get involved.
If there's a culture, right, and there are cultures that believe that the way you raise children is you beat them with a stick, right? You cut a switch, and when a child misbehaves, you tell them, go cut a switch, and you get a switch, a thin stick, right? And they get whacked on their behind until they're bloody.
Obviously, we don't agree with that.
Right?
We had rulers, by the way, on the knuckles.
Are we saying, right? Are we saying that the government has the right to get involved with how I raise my child?
Yeah, I'm voting that government out if they don't.
Right. So I equate it, right? So no, if a person who's not getting their education is not, although is there plenty of physical abuse going on in some of the yeshivas too that we like to think we're beyond? There's still plenty of that too, right? I've heard it, directly from the mouths of the kids and the adults but that's a separate topic, right? To be set out into the world at 18, 20, whatever age, without basic math and English, to be able to sit in a job interview and get a job, and dare I say, pursue a further education for a specialty training, right? That is not okay. It is not okay to abuse a child by keeping them ignorant so that they have two choices of careers, both earning minimum wage or close to it, so that their entire lives are going to be stressed above their heads about finances.
I think what you were asking is what's basic. Is that what you're asking? Yeah. You're asking who decides what's basic?
Correct. Where's that line?
Where's that line?
We all
exactly.
agree there's a line.
Okay.
We agree.
We don't all agree there's a line.
The question is where's the line?
No, we agree here. Yeah. What the rabbi is saying is that unfortunately the reality is that not everybody does agree there's a line.
Right.
So that's a big challenge. By the way,
there isn't a line. It is a gray area.
It's a gray area.
And if everyone was operating near or within the gray,
we'd be fine.
Okay.
Right. But we're so far apart in some instances. You're right.
Rabbi, this was very, very insightful. We have so much that we can learn from you. I feel like we could do this every day. The only problem is you're not cheap. But I just want to finish this segment, this chapter of this discussion by saying that I was quiet a lot of the times because 5 years ago I asked myself these questions that Ushi is talking about now, the guilt and the way we grew up. I'll never forget when I was a young boy, I think it was my father that used to look at me when I yawned out loud. Like it was not respectful. You know, he came from a very respectful family. Like you don't yawn out loud. And I'll never forget the minute I bought my first house in Staten Island, I sat down on a folding chair and then my wife looked at me and I said, the biggest one. Finally, I could be myself. So learning about the challenges of how we grew up and adapting those challenges and figuring out tools like we discussed was amazing. Thank you so much for coming.
Beyond amazing.
And I'm looking forward to the next segment where we talk about your experience of being a rabbi, integrating your family into the community, and the things that we can learn from each other and grow. Thank you, Rabbi. It was an honor to have you here.
It was an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to continuing this conversation.
As long as we're continuing to grow.